Hello and welcome. We're back to talk about something that's, well, becoming way too familiar. The U.S. government is staring down the barrel of yet another partial shutdown.
Yep, you heard that right. Again. And what's really wild is that this is all happening less than 3 months after we got through the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Remember that? A full 43 days back in late 2025. This isn't just deja vu, you guys. It's a direct result of how they patched things up last time.
Okay, circle this date on your calendar, January 30th, 2026. This is the deadline. If Congress can't get its act together and pass a funding bill by midnight, a bunch of key federal agencies are going to start closing up shop the very next morning.
See, the deal they made last November wasn't a real long-term solution. It was basically a Band-Aid, a continuing resolution that only gave full funding to some parts of the government. For everyone else, it just kicked the can down the road, creating what people are now calling a staggered fiscal cliff.
So why can't they make a deal? Why are we back here again? Well, no surprise, it all comes down to a really intense political standoff. Let's break down what's actually going on.
First, it's super important to get this. We're talking about a partial shutdown. This doesn't mean the entire government just grinds to a halt. It means that the agencies that already got their funding approved are fine. They'll just keep running as usual. The crisis is really just for those parts of the government whose funding is still stuck in neutral.
And here's what that looks like. On the left, you've got the agencies that are safe for the year. Think agriculture, Veterans Affairs. But over on the right, that's the danger zone. We're talking about 6 huge funding bills that are stalled, affecting massive departments like Defense, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, and even the Department of Education.
So what's the big holdup? It really all boils down to one thing: money for the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. Senate Democrats are basically saying, hold on, demanding big changes and much tighter oversight for ICE, especially after some recent deadly incidents. On the flip side, Republican leadership is pushing back, saying, no way, we can't just separate the DHS bill from everything else. Their argument is that national security has to be funded as a whole.
Now, all this political fighting doesn't just happen in a DC bubble. It has real, tangible effects on the economy. Effects that are only going to pile on top of the damage from the last shutdown.
Let's talk numbers for a second. The big banks have already done the math, and it's pretty clear. JP Morgan figures every single week of a shutdown will shave about 1/4 percentage point off GDP growth. Goldman Sachs says it's more like 0.15%. Now, those might look like small numbers, but when you stretch that out week after week, it becomes a serious drag on the entire U.S. economy. And the total cost could be just staggering. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that if this thing drags on for 6 weeks, we could see a cumulative loss of $11 billion in our GDP by the end of the year. That's a direct economic hit, all because of this gridlock.
You know, beyond the direct financial loss, there's this other kind of sneaky problem. Key agencies that give us our economic data, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they just stop working. That means no jobs report, no inflation data. So the Federal Reserve, the people in charge of steering our economy, are forced to make these huge decisions about interest rates while basically flying blind. Not good.
The economic numbers are pretty stark, I know. But this isn't just about abstract charts and figures. A shutdown has a very, very real impact on the lives of millions of actual people.
The ripple effects spread out far and wide. We're talking about federal workers who'll be sent home or forced to work without a paycheck. It hits students, people trying to travel, and anyone who needs help from departments like Health and Human Services or even the IRS. Think tax refunds.
So let's zoom in on one area that is going to directly affect millions of American families: student aid. If the Department of Education has to shut its doors, the entire system is headed for a major crisis.
Okay, if you or someone you know is trying to go to college, you need to hear this. A shutdown is going to cause huge disruptions for anyone trying to process their FAFSA for the next school year. The Department of Education could see its staff cut by up to 90%. That means anything that requires a human to look at it, like loan forgiveness applications or repayment plan adjustments, is going to grind to a halt. And here's the kicker. Even if the government shuts down, your student loan payments, yeah, those are still due.
Planning a trip anytime soon? A shutdown could mean total chaos at the airport. You've got more than 50,000 TSA agents and 14,000 air traffic controllers who would be forced to work without getting paid. We've seen this movie before. It leads to staff calling out, which means longer security lines and a cascade of flight delays. And with the $21 billion spring break travel season right around the corner, the timing really couldn't be worse.
So with the clock ticking down, what happens now? What are the possible ways this could all play out? Let's take a look at the paths ahead. Well, according to the analysts who watch this stuff for a living, the chance of at least a partial shutdown happening on January 31st is now over 70%. The odds are definitely not in favor of a last-minute deal. Given the gridlock, it looks like we're headed for one of three scenarios. 1. A DHS-only shutdown, where they pass the other 5 bills and just isolate the big fight. 2. A broad partial shutdown, where all 6 bills fail and everything from the Pentagon to the Department of Education is impacted. Or 3. They kick the can down the road again with another short-term extension to buy more negotiating time.
This quote from political analyst Larry Sabato just hits the nail on the head. He says, "Both parties seem willing to gamble that they won't be blamed. That's terrifying because it means we might not get a resolution until something breaks again." It really highlights the dangerous game of chicken that's being played here, where things might have to get really bad before anyone is motivated to fix it.
And that really brings us to the big, lingering question. We keep seeing this pattern over and over, lurching from one deadline to the next, using the threat of a shutdown as a political weapon. And you just have to wonder, is this kind of crisis budgeting just the new normal for how America is governed?